debrief and walk through with the of a use of deadly force by West Jordan City Police Department, Officer Chris Trujillo and Sergeant Gary Christensen against Michael Kenneth Lee. This happened on April 22nd of 2023 in the vicinity of 3258 West Jordan Line Parkway in West Jordan, Utah. And it was a use of force that was investigated by the protocol team led by the West Valley Police Department. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the salient facts that we looked at as a part of this review. And then we will follow up with a couple of videos from body-worn cameras that were also instructive to us in reaching the resolutions that we did. In the early hours of April 22nd, 2023, West Jordan Police Department received a call of a suspicious male checking cars in an apartment parking garage and a suspicious vehicle. West Jordan police officers were dispatched to the area. After checking the parking garage, Officer Strasters and Trujillo located a male suspect walking on the sidewalk whose clothing matched the description provided by the caller. Officer Strasters and Trujillo exited their vehicles and made contact with the suspect. After a brief exchange, Officer Strasters asked for his name, and the suspect provided a name. It is important to note that during this exchange, which will be also apparent on the body-worn camera, he also said that he was from 78 South and pointed in one direction. The officer corrected him that he was pointing to the wrong direction at that time. Officer Trujillo, who had recently arrested the suspect, recognized him and told Officer Strasser that it was not the name that he was, so he asked for his name, and Mr. Lee gave a false name and that he had just lied to him. It's important to note, after the incident, what we discovered is that Officer Trujillo had told Sergeant Christensen that the male had given a false claim last week. So Officer Trujillo had a personal contact with the suspect a week prior, that he knew his name to be different than the one that he was providing on the scene at the time, and that he had similarly arrested him at that time for false information earlier in the evening. And so at that point, as Officer Trujillo spoke, the suspect, Michael Kenneth Lee, looked at him because he said he challenged him in front of Officer Strasser, and at that point, on the video, which we'll show, he took off running. As officers pursued, Officer Strasser, who was the closest, grabbed Mr. Lee and held him from behind. He reaches over his shoulder, tries to take him into custody. As Officer Strasser attempts to take Mr. Lee to the ground, Mr. Lee pulled out a gun and fired one round, striking Officer Trujillo in the lower leg. As the struggle continued, Officer Strasser fell to the ground and Mr. Lee began to run. Officer Trujillo returned fire until Mr. Lee went to the ground, and Sergeant Christensen, who had just approached as he took off, subsequently also fired one shot. What you will see and what we discovered is that Officer Trujillo was able to grab onto the hoodie, and it was actually they go in circles while the suspect had pulled out a gun and fires and hits him. After the shots were fired, officers issued commands and kept their weapons pointed at Mr. Lee until they approached and handcuffed him. Emergency medical aid was provided to both Officer Trujillo and Mr. Lee, but Mr. Lee passed away on the scene. And based on the evidence that we were able to gather, it is likely that Officer Trujillo fired 8 times and Sergeant Christensen fired 1 time. And of course, the one time that was a shot that was fired by Mr. Lee, and the entire incident lasted approximately only 40 seconds. The other thing that I wanted to also point out, and I will point out as I've done before I move on to showing you the other materials that I'd want to do, that this again is my plea to lawful gun owners. The gun that Mr. Lee had been stolen from a motor vehicle just prior to that. And for lawful gun owners, please secure your weapons. Don't leave them in cars, because this is what happens when we have subsequent criminality that occurs and can cause injury or death to other people. So at this point, what I would like to do is to take you through. So go to the first picture, if you would. So before I start that, let me show you. This is the scene overview that occurs there. About 15 to 20 feet away from here in this direction is where the contact will occur. And then everybody ends up in this sort of grassy area where the shooting eventually occurs. This, go to the next one, if you would, please. So this is Officer Trujillo, who is the shooting officer. And also let me point out that I really appreciate Officer Trujillo making himself available to the investigators and giving us a statement, because that was very critical to helping us flesh out everything. And this is Officer Trujillo's body-worn camera, and we will run this at normal speed. The audio on this is not as clear, but that communication that's occurring will be caught on the second body-worn camera that I will show you with Officer Strasser's. So go ahead and play this, please. The call has been made, and they're responding to the apartment. There's Mr. Lee. Officer Strasser's will come from the right side. As I said, the audio is not as loud. This is the question and answering that's going with Officer Strasser. He had pointed in the wrong direction. He asked him if he has an ID. He says no. Give him the no. And you'll notice when he says he just lied, right there, at this point, Officer Trujillo has already taken a shot through his leg. He's standing. This is from Officer Trujillo's perspective. And at this point, they will be putting a tourniquet on Officer Trujillo, who's as they secure Mr. Lee as well.
Through the calf, through the front of my leg up my calf. Yep.
And you can see the gun on the grass. Now, what this was instructive was, again, it gave us positional clarity where everybody was. It also shows that at least in this one, that there is initial contact, the exchange of information that occurs, and that as he takes off, Officer Strasser is first with him, but he cannot get grip of him, and Officer Trujillo, as they're trying to wrestle with him, they notice that the gun has come out. Officer Trujillo, through his statement, indicated to us that he saw it. He has grabbed onto the jacket and the hoodie, and he says that he will not let go because he's not only felt the gunshot in his leg, but at the same time he knows that if he lets go of him because he's already fired one round, he's going to shoot or kill him or the other officers. Now what we did is we took the same body-worn video and we just slowed it down. So we'll go ahead and run down and play the slowed version, please. And when we slowed it down, you can see the gun right there in the suspect's hand. And this vantage point is from Officer Trujillo, who sees that Strasser is losing grip, but he is going to grab onto the hoodie and not let go. And at this point, they're just going in circles. So he's keeping that momentum and force because he's not going to let it go. And he pulls his weapon out at this point because he's already taken, and there's the first shot, second shot. And there are multiple shots that occur, and then eventually as the suspect goes down. So it corroborated both the statement that Officer Trujillo was giving to us as well. Now go to the next one, please. So we did a still of that, slowed down. As you can see, there's some tattooing on the suspect's arm. This was the gun that was stolen that I mentioned earlier that he has. And on the scene recovery in the grass, we were able to recover cartridges that belonged to the officer's gun, as well as a single round that was recovered, that was expelled from this gun as well. And this was the clear sort of still shot that shows at the time that Officer Trujillo is there, he has not only already pulled the gun out, but he will actually get one round of that fired. Go to the next one, please. This will give us Officer Strasser's body-worn camera, and this is really good because it actually is very clear in the interaction that starts and how it just moves that. So go ahead and play that as well, please. There's the suspect, Mr. Lee.
I don't know, people are kind of looking in cars. I was stealing over here. I live over on 78th. That's where I'm walking. 78th side. Oh, fuck. Do you have an ID on that? I don't, sir. Okay. What's your name? That's good. What's your name, man? My name is Johnson. What's your name, Preston? Preston Johnson? Yeah. It's not Preston Johnson.
And that's Officer Trujillo, who's taken a gunshot to his leg. So Officer Strasser's video was really important in the clarity of the communications that occurred, but also shows that he never actually got control of the suspect as he was unholstering and pulling his weapon out. And the other thing that was really instructive to us was also gave us more positional clarity as to the second shooter in this, which was Sergeant Christensen, as well as then you can also see the immediacy of the injury that occurs to Officer Trujillo. Go to the next one, please. So this was a still that we took from Officer Christensen's video. As that initial contact is occurring, Sergeant Christensen is also arriving, and he's parked his car and he's walking towards the officers when the foot chase occurs. So he, although comes onto the scene, he's just a few steps behind. He is witnessing the pursuit, the apprehension. He hears the gun, and as he comes on, and he fires one single round, and we were able to determine that from there as well. Go to the next one, please. This clearly shows more that the gun in question was then also recovered at the scene, as well as the subsequent investigation. Go to the next one, please. Identified this that took off him as well, which is brass knuckles, which is actually a knife that he had, as well as that instrument right here, which is a burglary tool used to punch and break windows in the car from the when you're engaging in vehicle burglaries. So when we took all the information, as I said again, the testimony from Officer Trujillo, as well as a written statement from Officer Christensen, we believe that the affirmative defense of justification would be applicable in the context of the totality of the circumstances, and so we would decline to file any charges, and we find the use of force to be appropriate in this matter. So with that, we brought this to a conclusion. Let me also state that I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Lee's mother this morning, and we briefed her also on what was going on and give her condolences to the tragic loss of her son's life. But she understood what the context of this situation was. So, any questions? Yes?
I guess if you can answer this one, just people might look at this and say, well, this guy had a very long history. He was arrested, just 4 or 5 days earlier.
It was on a misdemeanor on a false information is the contact that we understand that Officer Trujillo had with him. And it was that knowledge, and you can see, because he asked him, do you have ID? He says, no. He goes, well, what's your name? He says something, I think Johnson or something like that. And Trujillo says from the side, he goes, no, that's not his name. He just lied to you. And you can see him turning, and it makes that recognition. He finally sees it, and that's when he takes off running. So, those are misdemeanor citations that are issues, or people can be arrested on that. And but that was the contact that was there.
So there's no revolving door problem again? It's more you couldn't hold it?
Well, my understanding is the Class B misdemeanor of false information. It's not a felony. Now, having said that, if the broader question is, we have individuals who are law enforcement partners come in contact with who have sometimes extensive criminal histories. That's just the nature of that beast. And then if you go down and talk to the sheriff, she'll probably tell you, while we have 2,000 jail beds at the county jail, they will probably process in excess and bookings in excess of 30,000 people who are brought into there. So, that's a question for our policymakers to see how many jail beds should be there. But suffice it to say, at the current level at the county jail, the folks who are being held there are people who have major first-degree felonies and major crimes, that overwhelmingly, 80 to 90% of those. Any other questions? Yes?
How many total shots were fired?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as far as we can gather, there were 8 shots fired by Officer Trujillo, 1 shot fired by Officer Christensen, and 1 shot fired by Mr. Lee. Okay? Any other questions?
Are there any possible consequences for the stolen gun owner in this situation?
That's a really interesting question, and I think we're in a legislative session, so I think our legislature is in the best position to make some policy determination of how we want to sort of address this issue. Many of you have already known in the last 18 months to 2 years or so, I have been consistently saying that I am pleading to our lawful gun owners out there. You have a right to possess a weapon. That's wonderful. That's our Second Amendment. But there needs to be some responsibility with that. Do not leave your weapons unattended in cars. They're being stolen out of vehicles. I've mentioned this multiple times before. And then they're being stolen, and they're being used in subsequent harm to civilians and to our law enforcement. There's been several incidents of use of force where officers have been shot, and they've been shot out of because guns were left unattended. And if you do have it at home, please secure your weapon and take the responsibility and of that right that we have, and know where your weapon is. And if you want to assist and limit gun violence in our community, the one thing that is within our control for us as lawful gun owners is to know where your weapon is and secure your weapon and don't leave it unattended. And to your question, is there any liability? Those are issues for the legislature to decide. If people have their guns stolen, they don't report them in a timely fashion, or if they don't secure them, those are policy things. What I have to deal with and what law enforcement has to deal with is the collateral consequences of that. So there's room for improvement there. Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you very much. Have a great day.